Hello, everyone. This is Eva from SocaMom.com, and I'm so glad you are here for the Soca Mom Summit. We are talking money, and it's everyone's favorite subject and least favorite subject at the same time. So we tried to make it a little bit fun with the title. Hope you enjoy it, but that was one that was on the lineup that everybody really wanted to hear what we were going to talk about. So I have two financial experts here that are going to help you just kind of think about your budget when you have to split that between your personal household, your family unit, and taking care or helping out family members that live elsewhere, especially right now, because the tourism is not a thing. And if your family relied on a tourism kind of fed business, restaurants, gift shops, artisans, if they were relying on tourist money, they're having a hard time right now. So when those family members reach out to you, we want to make sure that you're prepared. And sometimes you don't have it. So we'll talk about what to do when you just don't have it. Okay, so ladies, can you introduce yourselves? I will start with Melisa.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for putting this together, Eva. I think this is helpful for the Caribbean and Caribbean diaspora at this time. My name is Melisa Boutin. I'm the founder of YourMoneyWorth.com that focuses on personal finance for millennials in the Caribbean and the Caribbean diaspora. I focus on helping millennials, of course, apply their Caribbean culture to their finances, to save, earn, and pool their resources, as well as I am a student loan expert, and I help borrowers pocket the money that their financial institutions charge them so that they can keep most of it or some of it for themselves.
I like that. And student loans, no one loves them. No one. They get no love.
Unnecessary evil at times.
At times. So, Cara, tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me, Eva. And it's nice to see Melisa again. My name is Cara Stevens. I'm the founder of the Frugal Feminista. I'm a first-gen American from beautiful Antigua. And I am an author. I've written a couple of books about money, specifically our relationships with money. And coming from a Caribbean perspective, we have a lot of expectations around family when it comes to money, and also a lot of expectations around women when it comes to money and how we should show up for our families. And so it'll be a great conversation to help us really unpack some of the thinking that we have around money, expectations, and responsibility versus other ways to help our families manage their finances. And in addition to that, I have a website, The Frugal Feminista, where you can find all types of information around budgeting, debt elimination, relationships and money, dating and money, all things to help you feel very financially secure in your next steps moving forward with your money.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful and very much needed, because that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about is your responsibility when you get to the US or you get to the UK, and there's a feeling that you've made it. And there's a different struggle in the US than there is, you can't go to your uncle's house and get a mango if you're hungry. A mango is going to cost you $3 if it's the wrong season, right? So there's a different type of prosperity that you have in the US and other countries like that it's just different. So how do you counsel people, Caribbean people, to manage that feeling of responsibility versus kind of, like you said, teaching people to have a different mindset and to understand it's different here. It looks one way, but there's a whole different set of things you have to be able to afford. I'll start with Cara.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that Oftentimes, like growing up, I would go back and forth to Antigua, and also, you know, send the barrels with us, you know,
Yes.
pack one suitcase specifically for family who want certain things, some material items. And just like seeing, also I used to see family members come up to the States, go shopping, and then sell those things back home in the Caribbean for as much, sometimes quadruple the price of what it was here. And so I think in terms of understanding obligation, I think it's important to not allow guilt and that sense of possible financial shame that comes with having to tell family members that I don't have it the way you think I have it. I think some of it is on our parts, maybe wanting to posture and show that we have more than we actually have, because all of the sacrifices to get us here may seem like it's done in vain if we don't have anything financially to show for it. So I think having us kind of step back on this end and say, number one, this is the reality, like actually putting it down in dollars and cents. This is how much rent is. This is how much education is, transportation is, just the basic necessities of living in the United States, depending on the city. And then having a counter conversation with our family members that show that those things that we have to pay for, like you were alluding to, Eva, you do not have to pay for in back home, because you have a larger community that you can pool resources, or things are done in kind. So I think being able to start a conversation around transparency and giving family members the absolute understanding about what the numbers are, and then promising yourself that you won't allow these feelings of possible guilt or pressure to keep you from obtaining or maintaining your financial well-being here. It's a very difficult conversation, because what money means to a lot of family members is love in this respect, but it's not a lack of love. It's being able to share the burden equally. And I think that even putting timetables and giving support around what you're supposed to do with the money will also help this feeling that the obligation is not in perpetuity, and that it has an actual impact and positive benefit to the people that are receiving it. I mean, those are just some of the things I begin to think about when the expectation is that you always support your family, but there also has to be some type of conditionality. Like, this is the money, but you're going to, build a home, or you're going to pay for school fees, or you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you want to see it as an investment on your return. And it sounds very difficult in a family to say that, but when it comes to borrowing and lending, it is a transaction that has to have some type of grounding in impact, or a return on investment.
So Melisa, how do you feel about that? And I say feel because there are feelings in this. It's not just, facts and figures. Mm. This is what I have. This is what I don't have. Like Cara was saying, there are, you get guilt for not doing. And sometimes you get shamed for not doing. You say, oh, he's gone up there and become a big man, and now he's just going to leave us back here and throw us away. What do you feel about those feelings when they come up?
So I would echo what Cara said about especially those living in the diaspora having a feeling of the weight of the responsibility, and maybe the guilt, feeling that they have to prioritize what is expected of them in terms of sending monetarily, and sometimes not only monetarily, but accommodating family who come to visit us, accommodating, shipping down things, to informal connections. So for example, having to drive an hour to JFK so that they can get this item down to someone who's going on the plane. And it can really, make it very stressful for the person living in the US or the UK or the diaspora. I think sometimes our families who are living back in the Caribbean don't really get the sense of how vast these countries that their loved ones living abroad are in, and the lack of community support. You are oftentimes living in the US, maybe having your own family, commuting, hours to work, having to maintain your own finances, and not getting the concept that, hey, this might be important to you, and you might see it as, if I need this item or need this financial assistance, you should be able to just jump up and get it to, down to the Caribbean as soon as possible. So I think, as a person who is helping family financially, it's not all, it doesn't have to be a burden. And I think there's some benefit, and there's the reality that oftentimes the family back in the Caribbean, they have made sacrifices to get you who was able to go off to the US, to where you are, as you're going off to college, or they sent you when you were younger. So it can be a healthy relationship, I think, if the expectations are clear, and the person who is being looked to send money can say to the family, hey, I know that we are a family who usually pool our resources, not only throughout our immediate family, but across our extended family, to the grandmother, to the aunts, to the uncles who are in our communities. And that can be very supportive. However, this is the way that I can help. This is the amount of money that I can send. And this is what I can do, and this is what I can't do. If you are visiting me here in the States, I still have commitments to my work and things of that nature. So this is kind of what I expect. This is what I want to share with you, is I want to be here to support you and offer you a place to stay and, spend time with you. But these are, there are these realities in the US or the UK that we have to face. One thing I would also say is that the Caribbean Americans or the British Americans, your personal financial well-being ultimately comes first. And that means that you have to have, your own safety net for yourself, an emergency fund, saving for your own financial future. Because if you are dependent on yourself, you have maybe extended family depending on you, and if you fall into a situation where you have a loss of income, or you have some kind of disability due to sickness, no one can be helped. You cannot help yourself. You cannot help the family, back home. So that is number one, as part of being able to give to your family, but take care of yourself as well.
So that was a great lead into my next question. So let's say that you have this agreement, this understanding that we got you there. We got you your visa, whatever you needed to get there, so that you could build this life and include us in it. That is an understandable agreement to make if you make that agreement from the jump, right? I think it's different from what Cara was saying, that they see you got there and it's like, ooh, that's a source of funding. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've made that agreement, I'll help you. Please make sure you help us as well, especially when you have aging parents that are giving you their last. They're giving you their last, and they're expecting some sort of return, which is a valid expectation. How do you balance your finances? And like you said, your personal financial well-being comes first. How do you balance that, especially in a situation like now, when you could be the person that has lost income? It's not just your family abroad that has lost income. You have too. What can we do to prepare for that, knowing that we might have those responsibilities back home? I'll start with Cara.
I think that's a good point. I think that similar to what's happening like within the African American community, what Melisa was alluding to is that that even if you're just making it into middle class status, the likelihood of you slipping back into low income and teetering on the brink of poverty is because of the lack of other wealth hubs in your immediate and outer part of community. So rather than creating a wealth web, we're creating wealth hubs where all the resources are pinned on one person. So when they falter, everyone falters. So I think moving that into just understanding what it's like with respect to making sure that over the next couple of months, to prepare for these types of things is being very, very clear about where you stand with your emergency fund. Like, how much money do you actually need to be able to have a safety net for at least 3 to 6 months? Also making sure that you are reducing any unnecessary spending. So the amount of money that we're spending or can save now because we're quarantined and cannot do the things that we used to do for entertainment. So like, going to travel, eating, even basic grooming, that money is now freed up money that could be possibly used to support families back home without you feeling the pinch of it because you're not able to use that money as well. Or even deciding that, okay, guys, rather than send money, let's think about it a little bit more strategically. Whatever the money that has been shored up from freeing ourselves up from particular types of spending, let's think about investing in an ETF or something that can consistently build dividends for you down the long term. So there'll be maybe you'll be alternating in terms of support by showing them how to grow money and also sending home money. But the expectation that the transaction will always be a sending off exhaustion of that money and there's no actual growth of money, I think it's something that we can begin to reframe, especially since we use Suso anyway. Let's begin to use some of our structures to make it more of a long-term investment and create more wealth webs that way as opposed to wealth hubs. So when it comes to your parents, so going back to the question that Eva said, when it comes to your parents, number one, using that money that you have freed up. Number two, setting them up for receiving residual income. So helping them see that let's save some money up for a little while and then build something that we can begin to receive residual income for. So that may be a longer term project, but one of the things my grandma always used to tell me is that land never spoils. So if we're thinking about building generational wealth through building more wealthier people in our family, let's begin to think about how can we pool the money or use the money over the course of a particular period of time and say, I may not be able to give you every month the same amount of money, but I can give you a smaller amount and then use the rest towards a larger goal to build something or to buy something or to create a shop in the village where you can begin to see yourself not just as the recipients of the income from like your family members, but even if you're an aging parent, you can get someone else that stayed home to help mind the business or to help mind the business, whether it be something that's like established like brick and mortar or something that is more of a service-based business, but helping us begin to see that the money doesn't have to be just a one-off or often one-off sets of money to be exhausted, to be asked again. I think we can begin to change how we look at how the actual life cycle of that money.
So, Melisa, let's talk about the value of the dollar in the US versus the dollar in a lot of Caribbean countries, right? There's a disconnect for a lot of different things. Like a party might be a ridiculous amount of money. Even in US money, that's a ridiculous amount of money. But you can get certain foods that are not imported for less. So when you're hearing about the needs that are coming from back home, how do you evaluate in your own budget? Like, listen, I don't want to not provide for my family to eat, and I know how much that probably costs, versus it's carnival time and I know this call is coming. What is it that you weigh in your mind to explain to them, listen, I can make sure you eat, but that carnival costume is, as much as it's a necessity to you, my lights are a necessity to me. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you have those kind of tough conversations, those cultural conversations?
So what I would say, what you're describing to me is kind of setting boundaries about, within the family dynamic and the extended family dynamic and across borders. So, I think just being frank with, family who are expecting not only support for essential needs, but for maybe, non-essentials, that maybe explain to them that, hey, what I can help with, especially if if you as a family member is going through a difficult time, or a loss of income or sickness, or or if I've committed to provide a certain amount of money per month, is that, hey, these are to help support you for essentials, and that's where the boundary is going to end. I would also like to say that, although we're talking about more about the Caribbean diaspora sending money home to our home countries, or our families' home countries, in some cases, money is flowing both ways.
Yes.
Even to family members who you may be sending money to, at some points they may send money to you, like Cara said, they come up to shop, they send money to buy items that they would like to buy.
Yes.
When we're shipping barrels, we're not only shipping food, but the cell phones that we have here in the US, they're here in the Caribbean too. And there is, it's, I guess, due to globalization and the Caribbean's proximity to the US, they are, there is a demand for, the comforts of life, just like what we have in the US. And I think even the younger generation, because they I guess are more exposed to it, and it's more accessible in terms of seeing it, online, and they can actually, add to cart on Amazon. There's an expectation that these trappings are things that they want too. So, one way I approach that is, even explaining to family, okay, you're sending money to buy XYZ, to buy this, electronic, or this toy, or this clothes. Hey, how about we say, as we're getting funds together to shop, um, put a percentage of that to start pooling our resources, in an account, so that if I contribute a certain amount and you contribute, home in a certain amount, when either of us, have a financial difficulty, it doesn't fall on one person, like Cara was alluding to. Just like how you are, working in the Caribbean, earning, and setting up your shopping list, and certain things that you would like to have and to buy. um, we should make saving, one of those bills and one of those shopping items that we want to add to our own personal financial carts, and use the pooling of resources that we are accustomed to kind of leverage that. So this is something I've had even in my own extended family, saying, hey, we are adult children, we have our parents, we can have a joint account, with multiple family members, and every time we earn a certain amount, we can put it a small amount. Again, this kind of serves as a joint and pooled financial cushion for all of us, and this could be an additional even to your own personal emergency fund. So we have money going both ways, but we need to, not just for shopping or just for essentials. The Caribbean is a place where, there are people, earning enough to save and even pool resources with their family in the diaspora.
So those are all very, very good points. And it made me think about when Cara mentioned Susu. Now, the mindset that comes with Susu and the way to save and things like that. Can you explain kind of on a high level what Susu is and how that has affected the way that we think about money, even people who have family in the Caribbean who live in the US, because Susu's in the US, Susu's in the UK. It kind of went with us. So
Yes.
can you give kind of like a high level explanation of what that is and how that plays into how we think about money now?
So Susus are a type of pooled savings. It's usually a group of people who commit to a dollar amount that goes into a pooled savings. So, for example, if you have 10 people participating in a Susu for $100 a month, for 12 months, for 10 months, then every month that the 10 people gave $100, it goes to one person in the Susu. So when you go from month 1 to month 10, each person would get $10,000, and one of the persons out of the 10-person group, it alternates. So person 1 would get the $10,000 on the first month, person 2 would get the $10,000 in the second month, person 3, and so on. There's usually not like an official like contract. It's all based on basically trust and societal connections. Mm-hmm. So when you join a Susu, of course, we usually, we did this in our home countries, with our aunts or the extended family, or or a cousin, or someone or a sister in the church. So the social connections kind of reinforces the trust, because if you're in a small society and you join a Susu and you don't pay the $100 for the 10 months, if you are person number 3 and you got the $10,000, but you need to keep your commitment, so the other 7 persons in the Susu can get their $10,000 from the pool savings, then you might not be able to come to family functions. You might not be, the church might get involved and say, hey, you had this social contract with the Susu, and it's not right that you didn't follow through with your commitment. So it's a very like community level, trust-based social contract type of savings approach. And I know at least in St. Kitts and even throughout Africa, a lot of women use it, who even work maybe in informal jobs, but the money that they earn, they would pool them in the Susus to help them, for example, maybe get a down payment to build a home, or to use their portion of the pool savings to buy a vehicle to upgrade from selling from a cart on the street. They would upgrade to a vehicle to do their business. So it's something that is practiced. It's something that I feel like we should not, shy away from. I think now that we have more technology, maybe younger people are not necessarily leveraging that cultural practice that has served us well. And also, we should use the Susu as a way not only just to save for like a particular item or a particular short-term goal, but again, maybe say, once I get my $10,000 Susu, 10% of it is gonna go somewhere for a long-term saving, as opposed to just using the entire 10,000 into the specific item you wanted to purchase.
So, Cara, what do you think about that? What is it that strikes you that we can take from that cultural practice that will help us prepare and budget? Because you get your hand once, and then you have to begin again. What can we take from that to kind of help us budget for situations like this? Some people do it for Christmas, some people do it for birthdays. How can we do it to kind of save and use that cultural community to better ourselves in the way that we're doing things?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to just growing up, I grew up in a pan-Caribbean church. Everyone from Tobago, Antiguans, Belizeans, like all different types, and we all contributed to Susu. What I do think, though, in the Caribbean, without being completely having generalizations, is that we tend to be conservative when it comes to money. So we tend to save more than possibly spend, unless it's like for a particular thing. And so I think using Susu, like Melisa was alluding to and I was alluding to earlier, to go beyond just the idea of having enough to make ends meet, to go beyond that. So say you have your hand in Susu, perhaps half of the hand, now that you have it, can begin for you to start thinking about ways to invest it. So that Susu money is growing on your behalf, and you'll be able to have more than enough after continuing to invest, to be able to not only repay your hand, but begin to think about how can my money grow, and not just have it be at the beginning and the end of a Susu rotation. And I think that I was actually working in Ghana when I was in college at a microfinance bank, which used Susu to help accelerate women in their businesses. Mm-hmm. So Melisa alluded to or talked about, getting a vehicle so she can, someone can move from, selling from a cart to being able to transport. Well, it's the same idea. Like, if we can begin to think about how can the Susu not only have a leg in helping us survive, but helping us begin to have the first set of seed money for a down payment, and looking at each other as possible investors in our first enterprises or our first investment accounts. And I think that when we move from seeing Susu as just like a form of savings to seeing that Susu can be the beginnings of investing and the beginnings of real estate ownership, or the beginnings of not just for like personal use, but like real estate, commercial real estate, or renting to others, we can begin to see how powerful of a resource Susu is. And I think that you can also be part of more than one hand. Like, I know that some people decide to do two hands, and sometimes they're part of different groups too when it comes to Susu. So for those of us that have seen the beauty of collecting a lot of money at one time that you may not be able to do on your own, can strike while the iron's hot to leverage it, to move that money to grow to have it grow for us, and then begin to actually reinforce the mindset of being not just a saver or someone that saves just for a purpose, but saves for their retirement or saves for the long term. And I think that we already have historically used Susu to support each other when other institutions didn't believe in us. And I think that in times of a pandemic, when it's very clear statistically who's the most vulnerable, we're still the most vulnerable in terms of job losses, in terms of income disparities, in terms of just wealth disparities from our white counterparts, that we have to begin to start rethinking, like, how do I, number one, invest in Black businesses, because those are the ones that are probably going to be serving our needs, number one, and we have to keep them open. And then number two, as a member of the workforce, how can I begin to secure my spot for financial security through the resources that I have, which culturally and historically speaking, for the times that we weren't fiduciarily wealthy, we were rich in relationships. And so how can we now put those two together to begin to get us all out of the red in terms of our finances and into a place of financial stability? We use what we have, and the Susu is a great place to begin to move the needle in how we think about savings and moving it towards thinking a little bit more aggressively, and also thinking more long-term about what it can do for us.
So bringing it back to family, and we know that family in abroad, they know about the Susu. People bring it to America, bring it to everywhere, and it's also happening in the Caribbean, of course. How would you take that and make that kind of a cooperative thing within a family? So everyone's members of a different Susu. Would you say maybe coordinate when your hand comes up so that you can make a big purchase, like you were saying, like a commercial property, or make a business investment or something like that? What kind of ideas do you have if you have somebody in the UK who's in 2, and you have somebody in Brooklyn who's in 1, and you have somebody in Trinidad who's in 1? How do you see them working together so that when situations happen like this, or when there's a big purchase that needs to be made, or somebody has to go to school, that you're able to take care of yourself and also kind of help as a collective? I'll start with Melisa.
So I think although we are, culturally we know how to save through the Susu for specific time periods, I think the knowledge, there's a knowledge gap still about how to invest, especially if you're in the Caribbean. The options can be limited. I mean, there are like insurance companies that offer certain products for investing, but there's not the as much access like in the US, where if you want to open an investment account, I mean, you can basically do it online while you're lying in the bed to open an account and even fund it electronically. So I think there is a knowledge gap that needs to be bridged. Like things like using my platform and even Cara's platform is filling that knowledge gap, that there is this part of personal finance that is beyond just meeting your essentials or getting that dream home that you're going to live in, where you can invest. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on bringing that knowledge, and then having more conversations within your own family, parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, grandparents, saying, you know, maybe these are things we can learn together. And then, you know, how can we implement them together? If you know, 3 people in an extended family, 2 siblings and parents are participating in a Suso on their own, once you have that knowledge, you can then have the conversation to say, hey, you know, we do this Suso, we save, we do, maybe we can have this joint investment account. Maybe we can take this online course about investing to learn, you know, where do we start? I know the Caribbean community and even the Black community in America, you know, we kind of shy away from even paying for financial advice, which can be a disservice to us, and is not so much to blame us, because the financial services industry, you know, has historically not been kind to our communities, and have taken advantage of our communities, Caribbean and Black American communities. So, but you know, in this age, you know, maybe seeking the right financial advice, seeking the knowledge, and then having the money conversations within our own family and implementing it.
So as we close, I would like to talk about what you all do. So I'm going to go to each of you and you tell me what you do, because one of the big things that we talked about with Susu is trust. You know, it's important to trust the people that you're giving your money or that are dealing with your money. And honestly, I mean, someone who understands me culturally is important. So, and you all have made a niche of what you do. So I'm going to start with Cara. Tell me about yourself, what you're doing for the Caribbean and, you know, people all over. Tell us what you're doing and how we can support you in that, and how you can support the community with what you do.
I mean, I think that growing up, like I said, I grew up single with a single mom from Antigua in New York City with my brother and myself. And it was actually her being abandoned by our father and her husband that kind of created my mindset around money, and understanding culturally what it means often to be a single mom in a completely different country, different culturally, and how do you manage? And Susu was one of the ways that my mom was able to kind of get her bearings and kind of get us to be able to have an education and send us back to Antigua. And so in terms of how I show up for my diaspora, the Caribbean diaspora, African Americans, it comes from a deep place of advocacy, of love, and deep understanding of what it means to not have at some times, and then using education to catapult you into position to have more, but then also having that be often threatened because of all the various structures in the society that make it very difficult to thrive as a woman of color. And so right now, and as a result, I've written 2 books. I brought them with me so you guys can see. One is Heal Your Relationship with Money, which is helping you really understand why do you do what you do with money, or why you don't do certain things with money, and to let go of any past financial dysfunction and kind of make peace with your money life in just 28 days. And at the top of our conversation, we talked a lot about the guilt, the shame, all those feelings that come with being straddled between 2 worlds and not really fitting into either at times financially because of the expectations that you have versus the actual resources that you have, and helping us really unpack how do we show our family members back home that we are doing the best that we can, that we're telling the truth about our financial situation, and that together we're able to, it's only through being together that we're able to actually transform all of our finances. It just can't come from one person, even though it may be the impetus for the transformation. And I also wrote another book called the Happy Finances Challenge, which also offers women, all people, but I wrote specifically for women, bite-sized bits of information on how to manage your money mindset, how to create an emergency fund, how to budget, how to think about your credit card debt, how to set financial boundaries with family members, and also how to start a side hustle based on passion. And I think for a lot of us who are, thinking about ways to make more sense of our finances right now, it's a great resource just for you to begin to think about, well, where do I stand in all these key tenets of my personal finances? And on the site, there's a ton of free content where you can learn more about money mindset, budgeting, debt elimination, student loan debt. So you feel comfortable about making the next step if you decide to invest, or you decide to invest with a family member, or you decide to have a conversation around money that may be uncomfortable, but may be very important for the financial strength and financial fortitude for your family, not just now, but in years to come. So you can go to thefrugalfeminista.com for all that information. And I'll also leave you a link, Eva, for the links to the books for people to use.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of your website,
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, I was on your website. Years and years ago, I was.
That's right. I interviewed
Yes.
you. Yes.
You did.
Yes.
We met at a blogging conference.
Yes, we sure did.
Years and years ago.
And you're Tobagonian.
Say again?
Tobagonian.
Yes, my dad.
The dad.
My mom is from Trinidad.
Trinidad.
I know it's the same place, but it's not the same place.
Right. We know that's true.
Yes. So when I was thinking of this panel, I emailed Melissa and I was like, who can I get? So I'm really, really glad that you joined us today. So this is exciting. This is a whole full circle. I get to interview you now.
Yay.
So, Melissa, tell us what you're doing for Caribbean millennials. I mean, that's a really, really specific thing and very, very necessary. So tell us what you're doing and how we can support you.
So specifically for Caribbean Americans, I know another part of our culture is a very strong respect for education. And education is actually, higher education is one of the main doors presently in this time, where Caribbean Americans now Caribbean people rather, in the people in the Caribbean, like me, who went to high school in the Caribbean, then moved to the United States to go to college. The students coming from the Caribbean basin to school in the United States, some years ago, were actually the highest rate of international students coming to the United States. And 80% of them, that's students from the Caribbean coming to study, use some type of Caribbean student loan. I mentioned the knowledge gap earlier. That's one of the areas for Caribbean millennials that I am filling that knowledge gap. So I did write a book called Student Loan Answers, specifically for Caribbean student loans. I had firsthand experience with the Caribbean student loan. And unlike in the United States, where you can find a plethora of information about your student loans, I mean, the federal government even has a website dedicated to explaining how federal student loans work. There is no such thing in the Caribbean for the student loans that 80% of international Caribbean students, and even students like me who grew up in the Caribbean, who had a green card, but did use a Caribbean student loan in addition to the student loans available in the US to fund their education. There's no information available about how to manage it, how to minimize the interest, and how to ultimately make sure that the investment that you and your family make by taking a student loan for your higher education, is a return that is well worth it. So the book is called Student Loan Answers on Amazon. And if you visit my website, you can find it there. Also on my website is listings of scholarships specifically for Caribbean and Caribbean American students. That's another area where I felt there was a gap, where when I came to the United States, even though I was a green card holder, I was not a US citizen. And when I was trying to find scholarships that I were eligible for, every scholarship would say you had to have graduated from a US high school or you had to have been a US citizen. So on my website, yourmoneyworth.com, you can find scholarships specifically for Caribbean American green card holders and the Caribbean international students. So that's a resource that I have worked on to help Caribbean millennials specifically.
I love that. I love that. That is wonderful. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me to do this. I know that you all are super busy, and Melisa, you're enjoying some sun, and I don't necessarily want to talk about it, but she got the nerve to be outside. I'm like,
I'm in a different climate, so I'm enjoying it while I can before I have to come back.
See, maybe you'll be lucky and they'll be like, no, you got to stay here in the sunshine for a couple more months.
I wouldn't be mad at it at all.
See, I'm in Chicago. I'm mad. Well, thank you both very, very much. Everyone who is watching, please go to SocaMomSummit.com. Everyone has their own page. Cara's going to have her page shortly, but everyone has their own page that has the links to their social media, to their businesses, so that you can support them and they can help you with what you need to get done. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you later. Bye.